When I first heard something strange about my son, I laughed it off. I truly did. I remember standing in my small kitchen that morning, holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold. Sunlight was coming through the window and falling softly across the table. It was a peaceful morning, the kind of morning that makes you believe everything in your life is steady and good. And then the phone rang. It was my neighbor, Martha. Her voice sounded careful, almost hesitant. She said, "I might be wrong, but I thought you should know." I smiled while she spoke, shaking my head a little as if she could see me. "About Daniel," she said quietly. "Daniel is my son, my only son, the boy I carried for 9 months, the boy I stayed up nights with when he had fevers, the boy who used to hold my hand every time we crossed the street when he was little." So when she said what she said next, it felt so strange that my mind simply refused to accept it. "I saw him yesterday," Martha continued. "He was at the cafe on Maple Street, with a woman." I chuckled softly. "Well," I said, "he's allowed to meet people." But Martha's voice grew even softer. "They were very close, not like friends." For a moment, I didn't answer, not because I believed her, but because something in the way she spoke made the room feel quieter. Still, I pushed the thought away. Daniel was married. He had been married to Emma for 7 years. Emma was kind, thoughtful, and gentle. She treated me like I was her own mother. Their little house was only 15 minutes from mine, and every Sunday we had dinner together. They seemed happy. At least, I believed they were. That night, I went to bed early. Rain had started falling outside, tapping softly against the windows. The sound usually helped me sleep, but sleep did not come easily. Instead, my thoughts wandered back through the years, to Daniel as a little boy, his first day of school, his college graduation, and the day he introduced me to Emma. He had walked into my living room with a shy smile. "Mom," he said, "this is Emma." She was holding a small bouquet of flowers for me. Her eyes were warm, and her smile was gentle. From the very first moment, I liked her. Over the years, she became more than a daughter-in-law. She became a friend. Sometimes she would come over just to talk. We would sit in the kitchen drinking tea and sharing small stories about our week. She never complained about Daniel, not once, and Daniel always seemed happy around her. So how could what Martha said possibly be true? The next morning, I tried again to forget the whole thing, but something inside me had already changed. Not belief, just curiosity. A small, quiet voice that said, maybe I should look. Not to accuse, not to confront, just to understand. Days passed. Life continued in its usual rhythm. On Sunday, we had dinner together as always. Emma brought her famous lemon pie. Daniel helped me carry dishes from the kitchen to the table. Everything seemed normal. They laughed together, they spoke about work, about neighbors, about a new movie they wanted to see. Watching them, I almost felt embarrassed for ever doubting. But then something small caught my attention. Daniel kept checking his phone, not once or twice, again and again. Each time the screen lit up, he glanced down quickly, then slipped the phone back into his pocket. It was a small thing, but when you are a mother, you notice small things. After dinner, Emma began washing the dishes. I stood beside her drying plates. Daniel stepped outside, saying he needed to take a call. Emma smiled casually. "He's always busy with work lately," she said. I nodded, but something in her eyes looked tired. Not sad, just tired. That night, after they left, I sat alone in my living room. The house felt unusually quiet. The clock ticked slowly on the wall. I told myself again that Martha had probably been mistaken. Still, the thought remained. A week later, I saw something myself. It happened by accident. I had gone to the grocery store in the afternoon. The store was crowded, so I parked farther down the street near the cafe on Maple. As I walked past the cafe window, I heard a familiar laugh, Daniel's laugh. I stopped. At first I smiled. Maybe he was meeting a colleague. But when I looked through the glass, my smile faded. Daniel was sitting at a corner table. Across from him was a young woman I had never seen before. She was leaning forward slightly, her hand resting on the table near his. Daniel looked relaxed, comfortable, closer than he usually sat with coworkers. They were talking quietly, smiling. At one moment, she reached across the table and touched his arm. It was a gentle touch, but it lasted a little too long. I stood there on the sidewalk for several seconds. People passed behind me, cars moved along the street. Inside the cafe, the world continued normally. Daniel had not seen me. I slowly stepped away from the window. My heart felt strangely calm. Not angry, not shocked, just heavy. I walked back to my car and sat inside for a while, without starting the engine. The rain began again, tapping softly on the windshield. I thought about Emma, about her quiet smile while washing dishes, about the tired look in her eyes. Maybe she already knew. Maybe she didn't. I didn't know which possibility hurt more. Part of me wanted to drive straight to Daniel's house and ask him. Another part of me knew that if I did, the truth might come out suddenly, loudly, painfully. And once truth is spoken like that, it can never be taken back. So I made a different decision. I decided to watch, not secretly like a detective, just carefully, quietly, a mother observing her son. Days turned into weeks. I began noticing things I had never paid attention to before. Daniel worked late more often. Emma sometimes came to visit me alone. When I asked where Daniel was, she would smile softly and say he had to stay at the office. But the smile never quite reached her eyes. One evening, she sat at my kitchen table long after her tea had grown cold. Finally, she said something that made my chest tighten. "Do you think people change after marriage?" she asked. I looked at her carefully. "Sometimes," I said. She nodded slowly. "I've been feeling like Daniel is far away lately." Her voice was gentle, not accusing, just confused. I wanted to tell her what I had seen, the cafe, the woman, but I couldn't, not yet, because once those words were spoken, everything would break. The next time I saw Daniel was 2 days later. He came by my house in the afternoon. At first, everything seemed normal, but then, as he stood in the doorway preparing to leave, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He checked the screen quickly, and in that brief moment, I saw a small smile appear on his face, a smile that looked different from the ones he usually gave Emma, warmer, secret. That was the moment something inside me quietly broke, not loudly, just softly, like a thin thread finally snapping. Still, I didn't confront him. I simply said, "Drive safely, Daniel." He kissed my cheek and left. The sound of his car fading down the street left a silence behind. And in that silence, I realized something painful. Sometimes the truth does not arrive with shouting or tears. Sometimes it arrives slowly, in small pieces, in quiet observations, in the way someone checks their phone, in the tired look in someone's eyes, and in the uneasy feeling a mother cannot ignore. I continued watching, because deep down I knew something was coming, something that would change our family forever. But I did not yet know how much it would hurt, or how quietly it would happen. Weeks later, the reality unfolded. Daniel finally admitted the truth, not with anger, not with shouting, but quietly, with a weight in his voice that made my heart ache. I listened, Emma listened, and together, in silence, we began the process of understanding. It was not easy. The nights felt longer, the meals quieter, but I saw something remarkable. Emma's gentle strength, Daniel's quiet remorse, and my own heart, learning to hold both hurt and hope at the same time. We began talking, not always comfortably, not always fully, but with honesty. We started small, sharing moments, listening without judgment. Slowly, the tension that had held our family captive began to ease. I realized something important. Life does not always follow the stories we imagine. People make mistakes, relationships change, but the bonds of family, when nurtured with patience, love, and quiet understanding, can survive even the deepest cracks. Now, when I see Daniel and Emma, I notice small things again. Not the hidden smiles or secretive glances, but the little ways they try, the effort, the care. And I am reminded of my role, not to control, not to judge, but to witness, to hold space, and to love. Sometimes the hardest lessons come quietly. Sometimes the biggest healing begins in silence. I learned that being a mother means not only raising a child, but also letting them stumble, fall, and find their way, with guidance, with patience, and with heart. Life is not perfect. It is fragile, but even in the quietest pain, there is hope, and sometimes that is enough.